welcome back to another episode of my podcast, which is called In a Perfect World. And I am very blessed to have an old friend on the show today, Bloom Post. How are you, Bloom?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm very well. It's Martin Luther King Day, I think, today, isn't it?
It is. And I know that because everyone on Facebook is posting Martin Luther King Jr. memes. Otherwise, I had totally forgotten because it's just a day off for me. So thank goodness for Facebook, right?
Well, speaking of just a day off, I've been looking at your website in preparation for our chat, and you have a beautiful little tagline, which is a sort of a riff off something I say to people as well. It's like life as a ceremony, or life is a ceremony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let me just back up a moment. When I say just a day off, I was not dissing Martin Luther King. It's Monday, and I take Mondays off. So that's why I missed the holiday. I have great respect for Martin Luther King Jr. Life is ceremony. That's a phrase that came up for me, gosh, I don't know, years ago when I realized all I really wanted to do was be in ceremony. And it wasn't necessarily possible to literally go to ceremonies every single day with teachers that I was working with. And as I grew and matured in the work and in medicine work and in ceremony, realizing that it's about really bringing it to everyday life. It's about the chop wood, carry water of what I was learning in ceremony, and then recognizing that that really was my intention, is to live life as ceremony. And that was what I started intending for myself personally. And then working with other people, just seeing how that would ripple out and empowering them to do the same became more of a focus for me.
So, it's very beautiful because there's such a focus these days on, there's a growth in Western culture of reclamation of psychedelics as medicines, and also entheogenic sacraments and the idea of ritual and ceremony, which has just been, really proliferating in the last generation or so. And there's still maybe an attachment to the peak experience, to the medicine ceremony itself. And I think we're seeing now a lot of work with integration and meetups and community groups that are forming outside those peak experiences of the peak medicine, and really helping support people weave the changes that they've undergone in that transformative ceremony into their larger lives. And so there's a deepening and an understanding of, as you say, life as a ceremony, and approaching life with some of the gains and the perceptions and awarenesses that we may experience under the influence of the relationship of the medicines. And it's really necessary, isn't it?
Oh, very necessary. I was talking to some students recently and speaking to them about this very thing, because I perceive it as a very Western attitude. More, bigger, bigger, just wanting to be in ceremony and run to the medicine, let the medicine do the heavy lifting instead of really doing our work with the integration, and wanting to have those mountaintop high experiences. And talking to students the other day, it's awesome to ascend Mount Everest, but you don't live there. You have those peak experiences, and then you come back to the valley, like I said, chop wood, carry water, your daily life, where you get to not only integrate this medicine into your personal internal experience, but also see how that it expands to the people around you and to your community. And I have witnessed I've been doing this work about studying and then sharing about 20 years now, and witnessing, and I did the same thing. I wanted to go to ceremony all the time. And I was going to, ayahuasca ceremonies every 6 months and doing 3 or 4 ceremonies each time. And I thought that was the way it was meant to be done. And that's fine if that's how people want to do it. My experience now is more of a recognition of taking the time to integrate. I'm still remembering and integrating things from my very first ceremony 10 years ago. And it's just really amazing to me how the medicine can kind of hyper speed us through things, and people think, oh, I'm healed. That I'm not depressed anymore, and this happened and that happened, and there's just so many more layers going on. And integration is so key, so that we do take personal responsibility and don't project or give our power to the medicine. We are the medicine. We are the medicine, and we go to these medicines to remember. And when they become more than when they become for me, they're a tool. And when they become something else, when it's more of an attachment, that to me kind of misses the point. When I meet people who are bragging about how many ceremonies they've sat in with whatever particular things, that kind of misses the mark for me personally. So my work, a lot of it is about integration, even within the ceremonies that I share and the work I do with people. And I've sat with people who've come back from tours in South America or wherever they've gone to sit with medicine and psychedelics, and they needed to integrate. Their whole life fell apart. That's what happened to me 10 years ago. I went and sat for a weekend, had no idea what to expect, was not prepared. There was no integration. I came back to my regularly scheduled life, and it just got flipped upside down because I couldn't live that life anymore, but I had no support. And I really focus on that. I really believe that's important. So I'm glad that's something that we're talking about.
That is. So let's, I love these conversations with people, with thought leaders in their field, and with people that have had experiences worth sharing like you do. So maybe we've jumped into some of the juicy bits, which is what I like to do, and maybe let's just backtrack a bit so people get an understanding of who you are and how you came to be, how this miracle of life has shaped you like bandwidth for your greatest becoming, as I like to say. So I was researching you a bit. You sent me some links, and there was a TED talk that you did a few years back in Asheville, is where you are, isn't it?
Yes.
And it was really beautiful because you opened that talk by saying, in 1999, you checked into a psych ward thinking you were going crazy. What was the genesis? What's your secret origin, Bloom?
Well, I love the wording and the languaging that you're using because it makes life sound so lovely. And for me, up until the psychiatric ward and even a couple years after that, life was not lovely. It did not feel like a becoming. It felt like hell most of the time. And I did not want to be on this planet. So growing up, I had a lot of trauma that started from birth and continued. And that created a lot of PTSD and issues that I didn't know I had and that needed to be dealt with. But it also empowered me. Strangely enough, those were initiations. I see that those were initiations now, which empowered me to be an empath, which was challenging until I learned to grow beyond that, expand that, and work with it, but also empowered me to stay open. I experienced trauma at such an early age that I left my body. I just went, what I would say, back into the realms. I was like, I'm out of here. This place is not safe. I don't know how I ended up in this crazy human experience. I'm leaving, but I was still here. And I continued to have these otherworldly experiences and get information and talk to things, and didn't know that other people weren't doing that. And so ended up pretty much just putting that on the back burner, pushing it down, excuse me, not really exploring those experiences as gifts. And I work with a lot of people who have similar experiences. And my personal take on what happened is that I was not stepping into my gifts and my medicine, and I was not walking that direction. And so I got pulled into that direction. And I really did feel that I was losing my mind. No one was able to explain to me what was happening. And I was having experiences that were scary and frightening and almost dying. And so I really did not know what else to do. And a therapist said, well, if you don't feel safe, you need to go to a hospital. So I went.
What was some of the experiences you were having, just so that people out there that may be going through similar things can, relate?
Dissociative experiences, just really trying to think how to say it in the briefest words, but dissociative experiences where I wasn't in my body and I thought things were coming after me. And I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to live. And I was afraid something was going to. I don't talk about this stuff publicly, so here we go. I don't usually talk about this part of it, but that's fine. I want people to know that this is the birth of a healer and that you're not crazy if they tell you that. But I was afraid something was going to turn the wheel of the car and drive me off the road. And my parents had an RV, and I walked by the RV, and I had this anxiety that something was going to push the RV over on me. Something was trying to kill me. I mean, there were things like that going on, and things like that had been going on since I was probably 19 years old. Things like thinking I have numbers under the bed. Numbers. I don't know why numbers, but I had to jump from the bed to the door to get so the numbers wouldn't get me. I mean, it was very.
I remember that in your TED Talk as well, you talk about the way kids are more open and sensitive and intuitive and imaginary friends and or not, entities or connection. But I remember doing all that, as a child as well, like pretty much numbers under the bed type of deals and sort of illogical, logical leaps where it's like the magical realism of the world. You're carving it out, and it might not be sensical in a logical sense, but it's the way you play the game, and you remember as a child, or I did, that you're in a game. Yeah.
Well, I think it depends on how much trauma you experience. I'm not a therapist or a doctor, so this is just my personal opinion. We do have all these magical experiences, and then we forget that we're in a game. Depending on how much trauma you have, well, I believe determines where that can lead. So for me, it became scary. It became something's after me. It became agoraphobic. It became a different thing, which was not fun.
Sure.
So went to the psych ward, spent a week there, had to get out, all sorts of entities there, but I didn't know what entities were at the time. And shortly thereafter, within probably 4 to 6, 8 weeks, met the first shaman that I ever worked with and felt really called. And as I mentioned in the TED Talk, I'm at the hospital saying, I think I'm crazy. And they're saying, you're not crazy. Take these pills. And the shaman said, you might be crazy, but it's in a good way. Let me show you how to use it. And completely changed my life. I truly believe I'm here having this conversation with you because of finding him on the path. And so many of the gifts that I work with now people are in hospitals because of them. They don't know how to navigate them. And Malidoma Patrice Sommet talks about these experiences, and it's the birth of a healer. And our culture doesn't really know how to hold that. And so I actually work with a lot of youth, teenagers who are having similar experiences that I was having, and helping them with soul retrievals and getting back into their bodies and acknowledging that the things they're experiencing are valid because their parents don't understand what's happening for them, but I've walked that road and can walk with them. And I also refer a lot of people to amazing therapists. I think it's important to do the psychological piece as well, especially as Westerners. The shamanic piece is a piece of it, but we need a very well-rounded support when things are going in a direction that could end up dangerous. But I definitely work with a lot of people who haven't necessarily had that intense an experience like my story was, but they remember, like you were saying, remember these magical, what we would call magical experiences from childhood, and they know that they had gifts, and they know that they talked to animals and trees or whatever was happening for them, and then they pushed it down for whatever reason. They were ridiculed or just life. We forget. And so empowering people to really remember their abilities, their gifts, what I would call their medicine, and bring that to the world, regardless of what they do for a living. You don't have to become a psychic to remember your psychic abilities, but it amplifies all the rest of your life. And I just want to point out, in my experience, it can be done without psychedelics, without plant medicines. Though I work with plant medicines, there are some people who don't feel called to that. And the plants have taught me that there are ways to bring that medicine to them without them having to ingest. And that to me is powerful medicine.
Mm. Yeah, well, I guess, the curanderos in Peru, they understand that everything's essentially vibration and that when they sing the Icaros, it's the vibratory medicines, which are like the signature codes of the plants that they're singing into their patients, and that medicine can be transmitted for healing, and you don't necessarily have to ingest the plant medicine yourself. But I mean, yeah, this is it. Everyone's vibration. Everything's vibration, and people have different sensitivities, I guess, as souls coming in. And yeah, our culture really doesn't recognize that, or it's growing to. Let's give it some latitude here. It's growing. There's a growing perception, both from more energetic sort of consciousness side of things, and also plant medicines and shamanic side of things, that everything is vibration. Everything has a potential to connect to our full capacity. So there's been a lot of paranormal research in the last 60, 70 years or so, a lot of studies, but there's also a lot of experiential work being done, and there's, as I like to say, this, global shamanic resurgence, where now potentially millions of people have experienced plant-mediated expanded consciousness, and maybe, there's even millions more who, as you say, don't need or haven't experienced, an expanded consciousness through plant medicines, but through the medicines of themselves and their own souls.
Well, and people that I work with who have no interest in psychedelics, they have no interest in sitting with ayahuasca, or they've never even heard of it, and it doesn't even come onto their radar, and how can they still receive the medicine? And that's, because people don't have to sit with plant medicines to work with me. And so I feel that as Westerners, and not to diss the Westerners, it's not just Westerners who do this, but we're kind of dense. Our energy is kind of dense, and we've forgotten, and we're not necessarily as connected with the earth and the plants, the flowers, the trees. We literally have so many ways to disconnect. We wear shoes instead of going barefooted. We eat with forks instead of touching our food. Like, even everyday little things are little pieces of disconnect. And so to be able to reconnect, sometimes I find for Westerners takes a little bit more. And it also depends on the person, as you were saying. I mean, I have a friend who can drink all sorts of things and still be functioning when it comes to plant medicines, and I would be gone. I don't know, I couldn't necessarily do that, but we have very different energetics and called to different things. So I love to sing medicine songs and Icaros, and sing that in different plant medicine ceremonies, whether they're psychedelic or not. And even just, I've done healing circles where we will either not ingest anything, or we'll work with essences, flower essences, or essences of certain medicines. So you're just really connecting with the energetic vibration, as you were saying, and then being with the music, being with the songs, and singing and rattling and singing the medicine songs. And people have had experiences that are reminiscent of ayahuasca in circles like that, and they haven't ingested a thing. And I remember one of the first times I did it, which is why I kept doing it, is that this woman came up and shared the experience, and she said, and I said, wow, that sounds like an ayahuasca experience. And she said, oh, what's that? And I went, oh, wow. Because that's when I sat with ayahuasca, that's what I was really feeling. A big piece of what she was teaching me is that we can all receive it. All these medicines have their own personality, their own spirit, their own awareness and consciousness, and they are working us. We are not working them. Yeah, I feel they are very aware, and they know how to get themselves out there.
That's what I felt from my experiences, is that essentially, like, all of nature is one indivisible whole, and Gaia as a meta-organism, as the mother, is mediating all the different species to transform her own energy, and for the natural systems at work to grow life itself, and to keep it all holistic and all moving. And that essentially the plants that have been popular in the last generation or so, like ayahuasca, even psilocybin, San Pedro, etc., they're assisting in our healing and removing, energetic, vibrational imprints and traumas, And that's sort of like the first step. And what then the healed human, or the clear vessel of the human, then has the potential is to recognize that, as you say, and I like to say as well, that we are the medicine, just like all other of Gaia's creatures, and that we have the capability to tune in and plug back into the garden itself, as one of the organisms in the garden, and to connect to that web of life, and to connect to what's behind that vibratory intelligence of source consciousness itself that radiates out. And that whether you get there from an ayahuasca trip, or through chanting or dance, or increasing your intuition, it's healing is that first step to your true potential.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. And I love the way you phrase that. I sat with a maestro, I mean, fully trained, years in the jungle. And this was a number of years ago, and I'll be honest, I had my resistance and I had my attitude. I wasn't trying to have attitude, but I did. I can see it now. And I said, I was talking about how Westerners, or I feel like, often overuse the ceremonies, or whatever I was getting into at that point, whatever I was choosing to focus on, that I just needed to live and let live. And I said to him, I don't feel that we really need to ingest these medicines to get there, in quotes, wherever there we think we're getting, whatever there is for each person. We don't need these medicines. We can do it without the medicines. And he said, yes, you're right, which I wasn't expecting. I was expecting a back and forth and a disagreement on it. And I said, oh, okay, well, why do we do it? He said, and he just got this twinkle in his eye and said, because it's fun. And that just completely that's when just so much ego shattering and just really just growing me up. It was just an amazing moment to just chill out, like relax, have fun with it. Yes, there's healing, there's all these things, and let's have some fun. If we're not having fun, what are we doing? Like, I was taking all of it so seriously back in the day, and to have him just this person that's so trained and I have so much respect for, just have a good time with it, had never entered my mind. And that really just helped me chill out, like, and have some fun with it. And also, up to that point years ago, I had been very upset about, kept trying to talk to people about discernment. It's like the PSOC effect. If you can play guitar, you can lead ayahuasca ceremony. That's the joke about PSOC. Uh-huh. And so I would try to tell people, I was just trying to micromanage everybody to make sure they were all educated and trained to lead these ceremonies, and not just sitting 10 times, growing it in their backyard and thinking they can lead because they can play guitar. And, when he said, we do it because it's fun, it also helped me to just let go of that and start trusting the medicine. If someone's doing it in a way that isn't in integrity for me, fine, I won't sit with them. And I'm going to let the medicine work with them, through them, and do what they're going to do, because the people who are called to sit with them have that karmic contract, that soul contract, have that agreement before we ever even got here. So it's helped me to, just live and let live and trust the medicine. That's just the biggest piece for me over the years is, do I trust the medicine or not? Am I trying to micromanage the medicine, or am I trusting the medicine? So that was a great learning experience for me.
So it sounds like you've had sort of the archetypal initiation, in different medicine cultures. There's this idea that you can have an initiation through initiatory sickness, or it might be a hereditary route. But as part of that, especially in Western culture, and in your TED Talk, you mentioned Krishnamurti and his, famous quote that it's no measure of adjustment to being sane in a sick society, to paraphrase there.
It's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a sick society.
Yeah, and our society in the West, and now almost globally, it's penetrating everywhere. It's definitely sick. It's out of unity, out of alignment with the principles of life itself. But when you present as being out of sync with the mainstream world, there is some initiation there if you can master the lesson. And you've gone from that, psych ward type of environment into a shamanic ceremony environment. So How did you, traverse those two worlds, and what have you learned from that?
Well, first, let me clarify that I did not step into medicine ceremony with anything that was psychotropic until probably 9 years after getting out of the psych ward,
Mm.
which in retrospect was really good. I personally believe I was already out there. And so my journey was really what I would call getting grounded and coming back into my body and being able to navigate, not constantly feeling overwhelmed by feeling everybody else's energies and emotions and all the information that would come to me, and really being able to get sovereign within myself, which I personally feel is important, which is so when people go and sit with maestros or maestras and they fill out those forms, letting them know what their history is, that's important. That's important for a ceremonialist to know, because I can't even imagine me on ayahuasca having just come out of a psych ward. I don't know. I don't feel like that would have been a good idea. It might work for other people. I'm just glad that I had some time in between to do my work without that kind of experience, because like I say, I was already so ungrounded and out in the ethers anyway. And so your question was, how did I navigate coming from that into medicine work?
Yeah.
I did a lot of healing, and I worked with this shaman. I consider him a shaman. He never called himself that, just like I don't call myself that. And I asked him, "Are you a shaman?" And he said, "I'm a student, and if I ever stop being a student, I'm in trouble." And that's when I knew I wanted to study with him, and that's how I feel about this path as well. And continued to study with him and work with him, and then realized I think like the first or second time I ever sat with him, he would journey on my behalf, but I was journeying and he didn't know it. So I finally got the nerve to say, "Can I tell you what I'm seeing?" And he said, "Yes." And then he said, "Hey, you're doing this, so keep doing that. Don't always just rely on me. Keep doing it." And it's like when you find that thing that you just can do. And it went from 0 to 60 because it's just the thing I've always known how to do, but I didn't know I knew how to do it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't have a container for it. And he gave me a container and tools to work with these gifts. So I moved quickly with it, and learning, and it just was so natural. And then just began practicing with people, asking if I could just tell them what I see and work with them, because I really had no idea how to bring this to other people. So I created my own form of internship or something, and it just really, I'd like to be able to say, well, it went from here to here to here, but honestly, it just grew on its own. I had no intention of leading workshops or trainings or any of the things that I do now, and it just was the natural progression of the path. And people would come to me and say, "Will you teach this and this?" And I would go, "Well, you don't know how to do it, you just do it." I had to figure out how to teach shamanic journeying 15 years ago because I didn't know why people couldn't just do it. I had to kind of find tools to share what I did. And then I guess in 2009, it was when I got introduced to ayahuasca, and ended up at this weekend of ceremony. My friend didn't show up. So I was there by myself, not knowing a lot of the people, had no clue what to expect other than a lot of fear. I had been shown, I think, a video from that movie of Blue Morpho or whatever, where people are moaning and puking. And I was like, wait, what am I going to do? What, so I was kind of freaked out. And, and I found myself holding space for myself in a lot of ceremonies, and have since learned that that's not necessarily how I want to do it, not necessarily the kind of ceremony I want to be in, but I didn't know the difference at the time between what I would call a facilitator and a ceremonialist. So a lot of it, honestly, was hit and miss, and 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, and, not necessarily making mistakes. I don't know if there are mistakes, but definitely making some choices and then going, oh, yeah, that's not a choice I want to make anymore. And so in some ways I learned the hard way because it was hard to find teachers to walk me through it. And so I feel like that's a big piece of why I teach now, so that they don't have to go through all that learning experientially the hard way. Not that that won't
Mm.
happen anyway. And I love to learn through experience, but it would have been nice to have had a human who could have taught me and walked me through it. And that just wasn't my path, to have, that consistent teacher by my side.
So tell me then, what are some of the things that you've learnt that you now may teach? Like in terms of back when it was all suppressed, all these capabilities you had that didn't know how to integrate into yourself and into the world. Now do you have not just labels for it, but how to communicate, but what are some of the pathways or what are some of the capabilities that you have that other people might have as well?
Hmm, that's a great question. I mean, I feel like the most basic one that people recognize when they sit with me is that they are an empath. And an empath will feel all the feels and feel all the energies and not have a real sense of energetic boundaries. And it can feel overwhelming to feel everybody else's emotions and experiences, and they don't feel sovereign. So that was a part of my journey that I went through as well. And so those are people who have gifts like I have that work with me, and people who are able to easily tap in with what I call the realms and easily journey without ingesting anything. They'll come to me to trust themselves, because a lot of people know how to link in, but they don't necessarily trust themselves. They don't trust the information they receive, whether you can call it psychic information or empathic information or intuitive information. I mean, everybody's intuitive. Even people that don't seem intuitive. Everybody on the planet is intuitive. Everybody's tapped in. It's just a matter of degrees, matters, where they fall on the scale of remembering. So the ability to link in with your true intuitive abilities, your empathic abilities, your psychic abilities, your abilities to travel through the realms, your abilities to offer healing for yourself, self-healing, and empower others to heal. Those are the basics, I feel, for everybody, that everybody can do. And I work with a lot of people who are trying to remember that. People who want to study with me more deeply and make their way into more advanced work, or, I have 2 apprentices now, which never 20 years ago, when I believed that if you told me that, I wouldn't have understood what you meant. And they want to know, how to really do, how to offer soul retrievals for other people, how to do healing work within ceremony, how to lead ceremony, how to hold a ceremonial container that's really safe. Because having a trauma background has very much informed my work, and I did not even know that I lead trauma-informed ceremonies. And now, because I bring in all the things I've learned, not just from shamans and teachers in this work, but from psychologists and all sorts of different aspects of healing, body work, all the things. I bring in bring in all the pieces that will support, so it is a more well-rounded, holistic experience. And being trauma-informed is something that I feel is really important for Westerners. Definitely important for women, also important for men. And I didn't necessarily have that experience in ceremonies. And
Mm.
no blame or shame. I don't think they knew. If you don't, have that experience growing up, it might not occur to you to do that. It was just a natural to me to really feel it. The most important thing is people feel safe.
Mm.
Once they feel safe, we can go deep. We can do anything. But safety is key, and people knowing that they don't have to hold space for themselves. That's so important, that they can just, Westerners, gosh, we don't get much of a chance to just let go.
That's so
And
true.
just really.
I find that as well a lot in ceremony these days. It's the ability for people to feel safe in the set and setting with the facilitator, internally with themselves, to give themselves consent that it's okay to open. And,
Mhm.
I'm really noticing mainly, working in Mexico with the buffo of various medicine, which is different from ayahuasca and very, very powerful, but it's all about sort of dissolving and letting go so much. But seeing the set and setting and seeing how, people may be conscious or unconscious of any armoring, any resistance, any of these sort of invisible internal mechanisms which may have built up through stresses and traumas of a lifetime to enable them to open to essentially, their true capacity, because the 5-MeO essentially is not doing it for them. It's just opening the locks and the keys and their full operating system for that source consciousness within. And it's so interesting because we all have these capabilities, but it's exactly what you're saying. It's like we suppress it in our culture. And I'm interested in this. It's sort of evolving. I saw a link yesterday about some MAPS talk that's out there we could find a link for, but someone, a psychologist, was using this term because a lot of the MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, a lot of their current thrust is bringing MDMA as a medicine back into psychotherapy with the stage 3 trials that are underway at the moment. And then also working with psilocybin for anxiety and some of these psychedelic and empathogenic medicines within a therapeutic set and setting, so sort of marrying the two worlds. But this psychologist was talking about this idea of planetary trauma. And, I've got a similar phrase. I say species PTSD. And more and more when I work with individuals or groups, I'm seeing that the patterning over the larger level with people is that to different degrees of adaptability, whether we recognize it or not, even the best of us, which maybe have not had individual experiences of trauma, there's a lot of intergenerational trauma, and there's a lot of suppression of our fullness, of our capability, of our joy, of our openness, that we may learn from parents and elders and others. Even if we don't experience, triggering trauma individually, there's still this like blanket of suppression in our civilization, in fact.
Oh, completely. I mean, as an example, just a specific example, I work with so many women who are afraid to open up to their gifts. And I'm not even talking about being psychic or working with plant medicines or being an herbalist. I'm talking about just being their expansive, vibrant self, period. And there's this memory, this fear of if I'm big, and this happens to men too, but I'm thinking in terms of the witches you couldn't burn, we're their granddaughters, and so there's this collective memory of being burned at the stake or being hung or being killed for being a witch. So don't be your big expressive self because it's dangerous. And even if that wasn't literally in their physical lineage from this lifetime, there's that DNA memory, there's that cellular memory of traumas like that. And that's just one example. And so I would say probably 100% of the people I sit with, there is a seed of, is it safe to be me? Is it safe? Will I hurt others if I'm my big, expansive, vibrant self? And that's completely generational and even just from the collective trauma, even if it's not your particular lineage. And we do a lot of lineage healing. Do a lot of that work here with students and with even in ceremonies, even if they're not studying with me, because that is so vital. I mean, for me personally, I did so much healing around the traumas. I mean, because there was sexual abuse for me at 8 months. I don't remember that consciously. That was pre-verbal. But I did so much healing and I was feeling really great. And then I started doing this really deep, intense myofascial release work, this medical massage. And holy moly, my body was holding so much pain. Even after all the plant medicine ceremonies, after all the healing, I'm feeling great. Life is amazing. But my physical cellular experience, it was still holding it all these years later. And it's just so interesting to excavate and uncover all the layers of that. So yeah, you're right on. There is collective trauma, collective PTSD, and these memories that are held in the body in a cellular way. And that definitely informs things. And if I remember back in the day stepping into ceremonies, and just kind of being expected to trust the situation, and there's 25 or 30 people in this ayahuasca ceremony. I do not like huge ceremony. I consider that a huge ceremony. I like smaller ceremonies personally because it feels safer. There's not so much energy for me to navigate, and I didn't 10 years ago, I didn't necessarily know how to stay sovereign and hold my container within a 30-person ayahuasca ceremony. So yeah, I really like when the space has that awareness that people are bringing things we don't know they're bringing. And even the studies you're talking about, they don't just bring those people in and just dose them up and go. They're getting to know them. They're talking to them. They're spending time with them so that person can ideally feel more comfortable to go into that setting and work with the medicine. That's so important. I mean, I did the same thing. I went to a weekend of ceremony. I didn't know who the facilitators were. I didn't know who the hosts were. I hadn't met 2/3 of the people, and I hop in. And we fly down to Peru with some maestro you may never have met, and we do a thing for 8 days, and then we fly back. There's not a lot of relationship there. And for me, I could probably have a lot more people sitting with me if I just put it out there willy-nilly. I don't choose to do that. Everybody's welcome to cacao ceremony. Everybody can come to that. If you want to come to other ceremonies, you got to start there and get to know me. Make sure you resonate with me. You may not want to work with me. So, it's like when people want to train with me and I get this email, that person I've never met, never sat with, never talked to, they say, I want to come do your 4-month training. Well, are you sure? Because you don't know me, and I don't know you. Let's connect. For me, it's all about connection, and that can really create the safety. I like the idea of Sangha, sacred community, so that it's not just let's have a bunch of ceremonies. Let's have sacred community. Let's have Sangha, and let's have ceremony within that. Because then if one or two new people come into a ceremony, they're held by the container of all these people who are sitting together regularly. And that's the way I like to work. And I feel like there's a lot more people doing it that way.
What tradition is that? That word, can you say it
Sangha?
again?
That's
Sangha.
Buddhist.
Ah, beautiful. And that sort of feels to me like the momentum is like there's been this shamanic resurgence, and then there's been now this phase where I see we're all going through integration resurgence, and the ceremony of life continuing. And then as part of that, it's engendering community again, like not just shamanic community, but people coming together who can trust each other, who have gone through similar experiences, who have opened up to their own potential and to the infinite, potential of the universe, that there's so much more out there and that we're not alone, and that it's more fun to do that together, to be part of that together, to be one. And I think that's hopefully where it can lead.
Yeah, the community piece is so important. Like when I started doing this work, even just studying and learning 19, 20 years ago, I was such a lone wolf. And really, I would have probably rather sat with anything by myself than with anybody else for my own reasons, for my own insecurities, for my own anxiety of being in a big group of people with medicine. And what I've learned over the years, especially through teaching and training and leading ceremony, is that the community piece is the most important. Everything else is just stuff we're doing, because the majority of people who come, especially if they come to train or be in ceremony, one of the things they'll say is, I'm looking for community. I feel alone. I feel like I don't, because they're having these experiences that aren't necessarily the norm, and they can't necessarily tell all their friends and family. So they're looking for a safe space to be able to say, wow, this incredible thing happened, and hawks are flying all around me, or whatever it is, and they want a space to share the magic and the medicine that's happening. And when I first started leading ceremonies, I was, like I said, I was very serious, very focused, wanted to get straight to the ceremony. And over the years, as I've matured in the medicine and just grown and learned, now we spend more time letting people share and be witnessed. And really, I take a break in the middle of it, like cacao ceremony, for example. We take a break in the middle to heat up more medicine, and they can talk. They can go outside and connect with the earth and be alone, whatever they want to do. But I've just learned that the community piece, I really believe, is what can make it so powerful. And being witnessed and witnessing others and being held in a space where you feel safe and being seen and received and acknowledged and appreciated, just such basic things that so many of us did not feel growing up. We just didn't get that, or don't get it in our life now. So yes, I totally agree. For me, it's become less about plants and more about community. At the same time, I love being in ceremony, so I'm all about it. But I like to sit by myself and do work. It's totally different than when I sit with community, though. Totally different.
So tell us a little bit then about what the services that you do offer. What ceremonies do you conduct? I know you've got your website, which we can put at the end as well, bloompost.com. You've mentioned some of this shamanic mentorship and cacao. What is the spectrum of services that you offer and the modalities you work with?
Yeah, well, I offer private sessions, either in person near Asheville, North Carolina, or I can Skype or phone call with folks. I can do it. I can do it that way as well because I work with energies in the realms that can do work with people. I don't have to put hands on people to do the work, and we can do soul retrievals and different things. That's one of the things I also teach students is how to work with energies in the realms, so that it takes a lot of the heavy lifting off of our human self trying to do that.
What does that mean though? Working with the realms and who's doing the heavy lifting if it's not the person?
I work with energies. Let me see how I can phrase this. Energies in the unseen realms that can literally go work with people and do psychic and energetic surgeries and do different things with them, who I've met and learned and grown with over the years. And I can, I don't have to physically put my hands on somebody to do a soul retrieval. I can walk them through it. The way I work is a little different than traditionally, because the way I was taught was the shaman would do the soul retrieval on my behalf, or they would do this healing kind of for me or at me or on me, and then they would say, okay, we're done. And I, as a Westerner, I didn't necessarily know what they had done. And for an indigenous person to do that to another indigenous person, they knew what they had done, so they could receive that. And what I realized is that I wasn't a part of the experience. It was just happening to me or kind of at me, and I was receiving, but I didn't really know what I was receiving. So over the years, I learned to integrate, great word that we started this whole conversation with, those ways of working with, ways to work with Westerners to empower them to do it with me. So when people sit with me, whether it's private session or training or whatever it is, even in the online mentorship, they learn how to do their own soul retrievals. Now, there's lots of times when you need to go sit with somebody else because we need that reflection in that mirror. And there's also a lot of self-healing we can do when we know how to work with these tools. So I don't just do a soul retrieval on somebody's behalf and then tell them what happened. I walk them through the process. We do it together. And I like to learn experientially. I like to be a part of the process and have a better understanding of what happened. And I find that the Western mind works that way. So that's just one example of ways that I work with people that's a little different, and I teach them how to do a lot of these things for themselves. And so private sessions, cacao ceremony is obviously in person. I do travel sometimes and share cacao ceremony. For people who don't live locally to me, the best way to connect is the online mentorship, which is also incredibly affordable, because that's what I wanted, was a way to connect with people, to teach and lead them through journeys and do one-on-one work with a community that's from all over the world, where they can get consistent support, because we meet twice a month live through a Zoom, web call, whatever they call those things, Zoom webinar, and they can interact with me. They can ask questions, and I can get them connected, take them on journeys, do the work. My experience at this point on my journey is that consistency is what really creates the shifts. And so being able to connect in twice a month with people. I was in Peru, and these women from Scotland or somewhere were asking, well, how can we work with you? How can we work with you? And I said, are you going to come to North Carolina anytime soon? And of course they weren't. And that was almost 2 years ago. And that's what really jump-started this idea of doing something online, which I will be honest, I was totally not into it. I was just like, you can't do this stuff online. You have to be in person. No, you sure don't. And that's the beauty of
it's all energy,
the internet.
Right? Yeah, It's all energy. It's like right now we're exchanging energy. We're modulating our responses to the tone, inflection of voice, the feeling we get transmitted across the technology.
Well, right. And what I love about it, which I didn't know that it would be like this, is we record all of the mentorships. And so if someone misses one, they can watch it later. And all the feedback I've gotten is that it's just as potent even as a recording, because time is not linear. Whenever you receive it is when it's happening. So that really shifted my attitude about online learning and what's capable, and the beauty of this ability to connect with the world through these kinds of forums. So the online mentorship is on my website. That's a great way. And if people are local to wherever I happen to be at the time, Atlanta or different places where I'm sharing cacao ceremony. And then once they've checked that out and got to know me, then they can talk to me about tobacco ceremony and some of the other ceremonies that we work with. But that, like I said, that's really about coming and getting to know me and see if it resonates, because not everybody will resonate with me. Not everybody's meant to work with all the people. I find the people that resonate with me, and they come and sit, and it's so much fun. We have so much fun.
Yeah. I think it's really important that, as all these modalities and shamanic world sort of gets out to the mainstream, and people are still sort of like consuming, like pick and choosing through a website, but it's as you say, it's really about the relationship building. I find that myself working with people, if we go over to Peru, do ayahuasca, things like that. It's usually people who hear me on the podcast, people who feel my energy, people that I like to form a relationship with. And that really curates the group. And it really means that we're sort of almost all friends already, in the sense of we're aligned. They want to be there around that energy, and that it makes it for a much more cohesive whole. And it's always better. It's always more fun that way.
Yeah, it definitely, the community piece. And what I love about it as a teacher is that it keeps me really checking in too. Not that I wouldn't anyway, but when I'm expected to show up once every 2 weeks and lead this space for people, like I said, from all over the world, there's some Wednesday nights when I'll be like, oh, I just want to chill or whatever. And I show up for the practice. And that's been really wonderful for me, because showing up, we were talking about this just yesterday in ceremony, that again, as we talked about earlier, people wanting it to be go, 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 mountaintop experience all the time. And some of my most powerful learning experiences have been when I was tired and didn't feel like it, and I showed up anyway. And it makes all the difference. And I feel super blessed at this point in my life. I'm really glad to be on the planet, and I spent the first half of my life not glad to be on the planet. And I'm just excited to stay focused on where this medicine can take us and what's possible, and just keep remembering sacred remembering who we truly are, and just keep being in community. And I'm really glad that you and I don't even know how we connected years ago, probably through Facebook.
I think it was.
I do too, and I think I felt your vibe, and I was like, dig him, dig his name, dig the red hair, dig what he's doing, friend request, and then we'll see what happens. It was just it's just a vibrational thing that brings us together, and we're just these little light workers out in the world and all our different parts of the web, finding each other as we do. And it's been an amazing ride.
So how do you feel now, like where you're at now, as you said, the first half of your life, now the later half of your life, but what's your worldview? Like, how do you understand the world and the ancestors and the spirit guides and the entities and the energetic ecology that we're in? How do you understand it? How does it inform you? And what do you make of it?
Energetic ecology. I like that. What do I make of it? Yeah. Depends on what kind of mood I'm in, what I make of it. I mean, we are in interesting times. What is that old saying? May you live in interesting times, and that's supposed to be actually a curse instead of a blessing. Yeah. We live in interesting times. My intention is to hold it all lightly. I remember being in Peru, and a friend of mine is an expat who lives there, and we were talking about certain behaviors of whatever, and she was saying, they just hold it lightly here. They just hold it lightly. And I thought, yeah, that feels good. Let me hold this more lightly without all the attachment. Let me see the stories that are being written. Let me be conscious and aware of the stories that I'm writing, and are the collective stories ones that resonate for me. And Ancestors obviously are a big piece of DNA and how we connect. But, I'm adopted and I know bits and pieces, but I don't know the full extent of my ancestral lineage. So for me, it's been an interesting thing to connect in with ancestors. It's been a different path. So a lot of it's been working with them without literally knowing who they are. But it's definitely a piece of what informs what we do. Gosh, the world is just what it is. I wish I could come up with something really wonderful and poetic to say, but I'm looking out at these beautiful mountains with no leaves, and I'm looking at this beautiful field with cows in the background. And my intention right now, how I see the world, is to really make an intention to be present and to be aware and to check myself. Part of what I see happening in the world that I'm not excited about is just an epidemic of narcissism. And so using that as an example is to just check myself for any places where I'm carrying narcissistic tendencies or qualities. And so for me, it's all a mirror. How can I see and receive the beauty and also just keep checking myself and my consciousness and my awareness? Do I believe what I think I believe? Is it true for me? Do I want to be behaving this way? Do I still want to be doing what I'm doing? Like, to me, it's always just what if, yes, yes, yes. I mean, I have my shit days too, whatever. I have days where I'm just like, oh my God, I need to move to another country. I cannot believe what's happening in the United States. And then I sit with I sit at my mesa and I connect in and I remember, oh, this is a video game. Right. How do I want to play this? So I'm human. We're human. It's not like I have some grand key to understanding some of the insanity that's happening right now, but my intention is to not get caught up in that chaos.
So what does a typical day in your life as ceremony look like, Bloom?
A typical day in my life, pretty much what I just told you. I mean, there's a cardinal out there right now, and I'm all about staying connected in with what I call the magic, which is truly just the animals showing up on my land and the fox that keeps running through. I love that little trickster who came in and purposely scared all the wild turkeys. That really is a typical day for me to stay connected with what's going on in the natural world and keep that connection while I'm seeing clients or working online or sitting at my mesa and doing the things that I'm doing. But a typical day also involves, I just started working out last year. And as someone who did not want to be in my body for like the first 35 years of it, that's important. That's healing too. And ceremony is generally on the weekends when I share with groups. Trainings are on the weekends. So weekends are busy for me. And, life is life. I mean, for me, it's about staying connected in. I hurt myself about a month ago working out, and just this succession of things started happening that I injured myself. And I felt I was in so much physical pain that I was forgetting. And I walked outside, and that's when this little fox walked down the hill, and I went, oh, right, I'm in the zone. I'm still in the magic. But that physical pain had really taken me out of being present to that. And so honestly, Rak, that's where I like to stay. That's my typical day, is just stay in the spaces that most people aren't paying attention to. I'm always talking to my guides and hanging out with them, and just I've gotten to a place where I'm making an effort to not effort so much. That sounds kind of funny to say it like that. Making an effort to not effort. Isn't that a Western way to phrase that? But I used to be a kind of a workaholic, even with this work. And so now I really am. Maybe I'm just becoming an old fart, Rak. I don't know. But I'm literally looking at this beautiful cardinal out the window right now, and it just lights me up.
Yeah,
Just finding the pleasure in the simple things and remembering that it's just like I was such a so focused and was like, I got to do this, got to get trainings, got to do that. And now I'm just saying, if it happens, it happens. I'll put it out there. I just feel more relaxed about it. I'm not striving so much.
I think that is it's getting the path of the satisfied old fart, Bloom. I'm feeling that myself. Or we could phrase it more nicely and say with grace and ease, in the flow and acceptance and gratitude and surrender.
Oh, I'm excited to be an old fart. Let me tell you, I was just teasing about that. But yeah, it's definitely, grace and ease came up for me years ago and is something that I've consistently shared, always offering it as an option because sometimes people don't want the path of grace and ease in that moment. But yeah, grace and ease. I did so much warrior way at the beginning of this medicine path and just finally came to a place where I went, oh, I'm still getting the medicine without having to, warrior my way through it. There can be grace and ease, and just, it's nice to get a little age and a little experience, and to really relax into it and have some more fun with it. I work, and we do deep work, and it's powerful and transformational. And just remembering to see the little fox and check out the turkeys and be nice to the bag boy at the grocery store, and just chop wood, carry water. Really is what I make an intent.
That is the ceremony of life, isn't it? So thank you so much, Bloom, for sharing all your thoughts and your wisdom and your journey, in this conversation with the listeners. How can people connect with you?
Bloompost.com is the best way to connect. Yep, all the information is on there. Connect with me for a private session, or ceremonies are listed on the calendar. The online mentorship is there, and that's just such an amazing group of people. And we have 2 retreats, private retreats every year for the people in the online mentorship, only for them. So then you can come sit with me in person. We have them here in these gorgeous Appalachian mountains. So yeah, bloompost.com is the best way. And I have books and all the things. If they're interested, they can check those out. And I just really enjoy talking to you, and I love what you're bringing and what you're doing. And I love your openness to all sides of this. And this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. So wait, just to end, I almost hesitate because when people ask this of me, I get very retractive. But Bloom Post is such a beautiful name, and the bloom bit, I go, what's the origin of that?
Oh, that's funny. Bloom Post. I think it's kind of abrupt, don't you? Bloom Post. Okay, so ayahuasca ceremonies. I had done those for a few years. I got to a place where the things were getting stirred up. The integration wasn't necessarily happening in the best way. I did not want to be on the planet. I was just going into that space of, I think I need to leave. I need to leave the planet. And I got in touch with a friend. Short version of the story is, a male friend and a female friend, we went out to this river, and they literally we just completely reworked my birth story. I was welcomed by this father-mother figure who were my friends, welcoming me onto the planet. We've waited for you for 9 months. We're so glad you're here. We went into the river. They dunked me in. It was a powerful ritual. And when I came up out of that freezing cold water, I was in an altered state, and the first thing out of my mouth was, who am I? What's my name? Which I would imagine we might think when we're born, if we, could remember. And I heard the ayahuasca speaks to me and has a voice that's very clearly not mine. And all these flowers kept going through my head, but that was my voice. And then I heard her voice say, you are Flower Bloom. And I just giggled and giggled and giggled. And my friend, who was my father in this ritual, said, if it makes you respond like that, it's your name. And I knew it was. I was kind of mortified at the same time, to be honest. Flower Bloom kind of wasn't what I was expecting. And so the full name is Flower Bloom, and I go by Bloom. And it really has been a medicine name that I've really gotten to live into. The flower being very different energy than the action of bloom. And so it's really, I took the name, I took it on, and it just, it's been medicine.
It's beautiful. Well, may you and your life continue to bloom, and may your fragrance go out into the world, and all that goodness enrich all those who come in contact with you.
Oh, thank you so much. May you continue to rock, Rak.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's been a blessing. Thank you for being on In a Perfect World. Aloha.
Thank you so much.
Many blessings. Aloha.